My name is Matthew Walker. I am a commercial beekeeper down in Chipley, Florida, just about an hour south of you guys. I did not bring any comb into the state, I swear. I had some dead outs in the back of my truck. I took them out before I got over here, so don't call the inspector on me. And you guys are a little weird about the comb thing. I've heard, not that anybody breaks that law from Florida, but yeah. So we run. I've been beekeeping for about 8 years. I started in 2017. I started on a couple commercial apiaries. I worked for 2 commercial apiaries. One was an 8,000 hive operation. The other was 15,000. And I spent about 5.5 years between those. That's where I learned. So I learned commercial day one. We jumped into it. I started my business in 2018, about a year after I got my job on the first apiary. We run a little over 2,000 hives now. Mostly my wife and I. We hire a little seasonal help in the spring because you kind of have to. And we topped out at about, I think, 1,000 mating nukes this spring. We doubled from 500 the previous year because we sold out all the queens last year, and then we doubled. We still sold all the queens this year. I've been making walkaway splits, for myself for most of the year. So we got to do something, either add more, which I can't grow another arm or anything to work any faster. So we either have to sell less or hire somebody. We're kind of hitting a limit to what I can physically handle. But the presentation goes through everything. I'll start all the way from cell production all the way to selling mated queens. But I'll try to move through it pretty quick. If you got any questions, wave at me if I'm talking way too long. One lady got really upset with me in the Crestview Club a few months ago because I was talking so long. It was a similar presentation. She huffed and got out. But if I'm doing that too long, just throw something at me, So I'll get the picture.
Somebody is impatient, they can just leave.
Oh, they did. She made a little bit of a scene, kind of hurt my feelings, but I survived it. That's how it is when you're a public speaker.
We're nicer here.
That's what Bill tells me. I hope so, because this is like a 30-slide presentation, so we'll find out. I'm gonna put that to the test. So I'll get into it. So I just got a few pictures at first. Well, actually, does anybody here raise queens? Let me ask.
Occasionally.
I just sort of try.
Yeah. Cells, mated queens, both?
Tried the cell thing, and then I figured out that I could find a existing cell and cut it out and then capture it into one of the systems versus trying to raise it from the egg.
Okay. Yeah, that'll work too. Anybody else? Everybody's pretty new? Okay. Well, this is going to be the entire process, so kind of hold on. It's probably going to be information overload, and I talk 10 times faster than Bill does. So just hang in. If you got a question, again, just yell at me. I'll keep powering through this. This is called grafting. I mean, some of you guys probably know that already, but just in case you guys don't, this is called a Chinese grafting tool. It's just looks like a syringe. It's got a small plunger here with a spring. This wooden tongue will come out, and then you've got your little plastic tongue underneath. This is grafting. All you're really doing is just scooping up one of these larvae. You want to get a larva that's 4 days old. So, they're eggs for 3 days, and then the 4th day, they dissolve into a larva. That's the ideal queen. This freaks a lot of people out because they're scared. They're like, I don't have the eyesight to see, or they're scared they're going to graft an older larva, one of the big ones. I'll tell you, in spring, the cell builders are super forgiving. So if you're a little rough with a larva, if you pick a larva that's like day 6 or something, they're going to make a cell, I promise. That puts a lot of people off. I didn't do this for like my first 3 years because it gave me so much anxiety because I couldn't get the hang of it. My wife and I used to graft 200. Man, we used to grab like 200 cells a day or something, and for weeks, and we would get like 10 cells. We were the worst. So if we can do it, I promise you you can do it too. We're up to about an 80% on our success rate now as far as getting cells made, which is generally pretty good as far as an average goes. So this is what a larva will look like. This is kind of a 4-day-old larva. You can see there's a lot of royal jelly there in the bottom of the cups. That means those larvae are well fed. Those are the larvae you want to pull from because they have adequate nutrition. If you saw a larva that was just sitting in basically a dry cell with no royal jelly, those you probably wouldn't want to take because they might have some kind of nutritional deficiency. You can kind of see the size of the larvae here as opposed to the egg. So all those eggs are 24 hours old, and you can tell that because they're standing upright in the cell. On day 2, they fall on the side before they dissolve into a larva. So that kind of gives you a size reference there. So they're pretty darn small, but you can go a little bigger. And honestly, especially if you're just learning, it's going to be just fine. When you want to find the right age larva, you want to actually look for the eggs because, if you follow the path of the eggs, eventually they'll start dissolving into larvae. and that'll kind of help you get the correct age. And as the larvae sort of go in their cyclical pattern, they'll start getting larger. But that'll be pretty obvious. But this worries people a lot. But I tell you, grafting is the easier part of making cells. It's maintaining the cell builder colonies. That's where the real work is. That's the larva that's been grafted in a cup. That's just a plastic JZBZ cup. See how tiny it is right there? That's you want to get it right there in the center. You can tell with the Chinese grafting tool, it catches a little bit of that rolled jelly. So there's just a little bit of rolled jelly in there. That way that larva does not dry out. It's got food like right away. And usually it helps kind of get it off your grafting tool when you press the plunger. There's a lot of other types of grafting tools. There's German and all kinds of other stuff. I tell you, the Chinese are the best. They work really good. They usually come in like packs of 10. 8 or 9 of them are trash. The 1 or 2 that are good, they're so good, you can graft hundreds of thousands of larvae. If you work with other beekeepers who also graft, they will steal your good grafting tool, so hide it. My wife and the lady that helped us, I had to constantly like hide it under the table and stuff because they would just pick it up because theirs would break, and it takes so long to find the correct tool and to sort of get the tongue bit in the correct shape that people just snatch it. So if you're doing it by yourself, that's not a problem. A lot of questions I get about the cell cups here. A lot of people, there's a lot of, I would call them myths, personally. There's a lot of myths in beekeeping. A lot of people think the plastic's not good and you have to use beeswax cups. That's not true. They do great. A lot of people think you can't use the brand new cups, like straight out of the Amazon bag, because the bees don't like the smell. That's not true. Some people think you've got to like stick them in a beehive for 24 hours so the bees coat them with their pheromones. It's not true. I have literally 5-gallon buckets of these in the barn, just all over the place, that we've just kind of thrown in over the years from failed grafts. They've got like wax moth on them, ants, dead roaches, probably a dead rat in the bottom of the bucket somewhere, old wax. And you know what? I can graft a larva in it and I'm going to get it 80%, the same as I do with any other type and variation of those cell cups. So don't worry about the cell cups. Some people will tell you have to graft with yogurt or distilled water. Some people will say you have to start harvesting rolled jelly with a syringe and keep it in the fridge so you can prime your cups for the grafts. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Just scoop them up, put them in there. You're going to be okay. This is kind of what the whole little process looks like. We do 20 cells per bar. You guys are in the same climate, so I would imagine we can do the same thing here. So that's potentially a maximum of 60 grafts per cell builder. And you can see you have these little bars. They'll actually pop out of your frame there. There's like just a little groove where you can press them out. You're rarely going to get 100%. It does happen sometimes, and it's super exciting. And then, next week we'll get like 10%. And it humbles you. But so that was a pretty one. So I took that picture. But a lot of times they're very spotty. You'll just have cells that are missing. There's the completed queen cells. I don't know. We bought some different colored cups. You can see the royal jelly that's up here in the top. The larva's down here, right, in your wax. You've got the royal jelly coating right up here. You want to see, ideally, by the time that queen emerges from the cell, there's still a little bit of royal jelly up there. Especially you want to see it when you first pull them out. These were probably just capped off. They'll seal 5 days after you put your grafts in. And that tells you that there's plenty of food for that larva. If the queen emerges and there's still royal jelly left in your cell cup, that tells you that larva had all of the nutritional requirements it needed and a surplus. So you know that queen was well fed. That's going to result in a larger queen like this with a really large abdomen. And she's going to be able to lay more eggs. She's going to be fertile for longer. You're going to have less supersedure issues. You're going to have a calmer, more productive hive. The health of a queen always starts with the queen cell. There's a lot of factors that goes into a good queen, but you got to get this right at first. So feeding them properly is really good. There's a lot of ways to increase the calories there in your cell, but in spring it's pretty easy. Basic timeline, day 1, that's when that queen lays the egg. It's standing straight up. Day 4, the egg it doesn't hatch, it's an outer coating, it dissolves. That releases the larva. Then the nurse bees will come and give that larva royal jelly. And after you graft, because you want to graft right here at day 4, that's the larva you want to scoop up. You'll put it in your little cell cups there, like I was showing earlier. 5 days later, once it's in a cell builder, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that's when it's capped. That was that picture I just showed you guys where it's basically like a sealed off cocoon. And then roughly, I say ish here, some of this timeline is flexible. You'll see if you look this stuff up online, people go, it's day 15, it's day this, day that. The queen timeline is very mushy sometimes, but roughly day 16 is when the virgin queen will emerge from that queen cell. But it can definitely happen a little earlier for certain. There's your queen bee timeline. Once that virgin queen has emerged for the queen cell, that would be day 1 here in this time cycle. Usually the first 5 days, she's just maturing and just trying to get around. Her wings have to harden. Her exoskeleton has to harden. She can't do very much for those first few days. She just kind of hangs out in the colony. And then eventually she will start going on just brief orientation flights to prepare her for ultimately for her mating flights. And mating flights usually occur day 5 or 8. Once she, between days 5 and 8, after she's emerged for the queen cell, that's when she's going to take mating flights. Typically, they go on about 3 mating flights over 3 different days. But again, it can vary a little bit. And on average, they mate between 10 and 20 drones. But it can be less, which would result in a very bad queen. It can be more, which will result in a better queen. This is the really risky window here. Because, you know, dragonflies like to eat them, birds like to eat them, they like to fly across the road and get hit by somebody's truck. You know, there's so many things that can go wrong. Weather can be bad, and that's where you have this extended timeline here, day 8 to 21. That's if you have a lot of rain for like a couple of weeks, that can delay that queen from leaving the colony. Another thing that I don't think I put on here that can delay the queen from leaving the colony is if your colony is too over-supered and you have a lot of dead, empty space in the colony without the bees being able to cover it. Because the queen doesn't really want to do these things. She does not want to go on those flights. What happens is the worker bees will corral her and basically just shove her out the door. So if you have a really giant hive, like this tall, but you got this many bees in the bottom, the queen can run up here and hide, and that can delay your mating. If she gets delayed too long, she won't leave at all, and then she'll become a drone layer. That's your infertile queen, and there's no way to save that. You got to pinch her, start over. I start getting nervous if I don't see her usually leaving, usually within like the first 2 days, first week or so. There's 2 types of queen cell production. I don't know if you guys have covered this in class. It's usually like a... Okay, sweet. Okay, I won't go too much into it then. Just basically there's an emergency response and a supersedure response when it comes to queen cell production. All that really means is you either have a queenless hive completely. That's not only starting your queen cell, but capping your queen cell off without a queen ever being, a mated queen being present in there, without her pheromone being present. Or you have the supersedure, which is a queen right response, which is where you'll take your cells after they've been grafted, put into a queenless starter for 24 hours. You'll actually move them above an excluder in an empty box in a queen right colony. And because you have that queen in the bottom, and she can't get up there because of the excluder, and you have your grafts up here, her pheromone will actually put the bees in a state of pretty much of relaxation because they know they have a queen, they know they're going to be okay. So those cells, they'll actually finish drawing those cells out and capping them off in a way that they're not under tremendous amounts of stress, which results in larger, higher quality queen cells. If you want to produce really good cells, good queens, you really need to aim to use the supersedure response. An emergency response is if you just went out there and made like a queenless split. You took a 5-frame box, took 4 frames of brood, no queen, just bees, put your grafts in there and left them in there for the 5 days until they're capped. That would be an emergency response. Those bees know they don't have a queen. You know, when they don't have a queen, they get all freaky and stressed out and stuff. So they're under a lot of stress, so they just don't do as good of a job like we would if we were trying to build something under a state of stress. We're not going to do as good of a job. So you want to actually aim for both. However, you have to have the emergency response because the bees do not want to make cells if they think they have a queen, generally, unless it's swarming, but that's kind of a different thing. So you do need to put your grafts, those little larvae I was showing, in a queenless hive overnight, at least. 24 hours is fine. Overnight's fine. They'll start making those queen cells. You'll see like a little ring of wax around those plastic cups. And then you take that whole frame out and you put it above an excluder, above a queen right colony. Because that way the emergency response starts more queen cells because the bees think they're going to die. So they try to make as many as they can. So, and the cool thing with bees, if they start making a queen cell, they'll finish making a queen cell. It's an automatic response. That's why you can move them above an excluder in a queen right colony and they'll finish those cells off, but they'll do it in a state of not stress. So there's a lot of ways to do that. The way that I like to do it is to use what's called a cloak board cell builder. These are my favorite. There's a little bit of a learning curve to them, but essentially the simple way to do it is you have a double deep colony, just like this. This is your cloak board here. This is your slide that goes in and out. You can see there's a queen excluder, but all it is just a wood shim with a queen excluder, and it's got this metal slide that you can take all the way in, take it all the way out, and it goes in between your 2 boxes of your colonies here, just a regular double deep. What you want to do is you want to just have a queen down here doing her thing, just a regular beehive. You take your cloak board in between the 2 boxes, You're going to slide this metal slide in above the excluder. And what that does, it seals off the pheromone of the queen down here from reaching this top box. So now the bees in the top box think they're queenless. That's going to trigger an emergency response where they want to make queen cells. After 24 hours of them starting to make those cells, you pull the slide back out. The queen can't get up there, right? Because you still have an excluder here underneath that slide. That will reunite the colony. So the queen's pheromones will travel up to the top box as well. And that will trigger a supersedure response. So you can actually make a lot of cells at very, very high quality with just a single hive without having to make a queenless split, which everybody knows takes a lot of resources, right, to maintain a queenless hive. This to me is ideal. There's a lot of other little tricks, but that's the gist of it, and that works just fine. They're like $50, and honestly, it's way better than having to make a queenless nuke and then put your grafts above here.
How long do you have to leave that on there before the bees in the top box think they need a new queen?
I put it in the day before.
So just in 24 hours?
Even less than that. I usually do it the night because I'm out working bees. I come back at dark. I slide it on in there. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes we forget to do it. We get busy. And we'll put it in even just a couple hours before we put the grafts in. Now, we'll get a less of a success rate if it's just an hour or two, but we'll still get enough to be better than not grafting at all. But yeah, you don't need 20. If you read online, they'll tell you 24 hours. You don't have to do that. In my opinion, bees know they're queenless truly in 15 minutes for the most part. It's a very rapid thing. I would just say just put it in the night before. If you got time to do 24 hours, do it. It's certainly not going to hurt anything. The other thing you got to watch out for when you do put that slide in, before you put your grafts in, you've got to check, because you want to have a lot of open brood up here. That's going to draw a lot of your nurse bees because they're going to be drawn to the queen down there, right? You want to take all that larva down there on the frames, bring it in this top box. That way the nurse bees will sort of be attracted to up here. So when you put the slide in, they're less likely to try to jump out the ledge or, if you're like me, you've got holes in your boxes, try to get through the holes. Queen exclusion is not perfect. But what they'll do if you move a lot of open brood up here with that slide in and you triggered an emergency response, they're going to try to make their own cells, right, off their 4-day-old larva. So before you put your grafts in, you've got to check all these frames and cut out all the cells that they're trying to make, because they would much rather make their own stuff than make ours, And they're only going to make so many cells depending on the time of the year and the amount of bees that are in there. So if you cut all of their cells out and they don't have an option to make a cell, even if your grafts aren't so perfect, you get a larva that's a little too big, you're a little rough with her, they're going to take it anyways because they think they're going to die and they got no other choice. So that's really nice for this. But yeah, that answers your question. Yeah, I love these things. I was scared to use them for a long time, and there was a little learning curve, but this is all we do now. We run 16 double deep cloakboard cell builders like this, so we can produce about 500 to 600 cells every 5 days off that. So that's a lot. You don't need that much if you're doing it. You can do 60 cells yourself in there, or you can graft less. It doesn't matter. The cool thing is when you're tired of grafting, you just take the cloakboard off. It just slides on out. You throw it in the barn. You put it in there next spring. Boom, you got all the cells you want. And this thing's $50. You can sell a queen cell, at least where I'm at, for $5 a piece. You sell 10 queen cells. Well, if you're making 60, you just paid for your cloakboard and you made a profit. So it's a minimal investment. Just got to get over that just a little hump of the learning curve. I'm going to go into some of the different types of mating nukes that I've used. So when you have your cell, right, a lot of people want a queen. That's kind of the whole point of queen rearing. So to have that, you got to have a mating nuke. So there's a lot of different types, a lot of different sizes. I could talk for 20,000 years on all the different variations. I'll try to keep it simple. One really easy one to do, especially if you don't have a lot of hives, just a 2-frame. You can just build a little basic 2-frame plywood box like that. It's no problem. You can even take a 5-frame box and leave the empty space in there and just put 2 frames. You'll stick your queen cell in there, and if you're lucky, a couple weeks later after it hatches, you're going to have a queen. So a lot of pros with these is they're just cheap. You can do a frame of brood, frame of honey, put a queen cell in there. They're pretty good. They don't take much of a beating from robbing or beetles and all that stuff that's going to happen. They're pretty weak, but if you just want to raise a few queens, you can always hash that queen mater in there, take her out, and then take those 2 frames and recombine them back into your parent colony. It's a minimal investment, and those boxes are easy to make. And they're pretty good. And the queen has a lot of time to lay in those frames, especially if you're using deep frames. So swarming is not going to be such a big problem. What I tried to do when we first started raising queens is we used queen castles. It's not the best picture, but if you can tell here, it's 3 colonies in one. You got 3 frames, 3 frames, 3 frames, and I've got 2, I don't know what that is, 1/2-inch plywood walls there. There's an entrance here under this fruit, entrance here over here. There's also a third entrance over here. You're going to take a queen excluder and put it on kind of as a lid, and then you'll actually put your hive lid on there. And hopefully those queens will orient to those different, because queens usually orient to color and landmarks. That's when we kind of paint weird little things like fruit or whatever on there. And hopefully they'll fly into that entrance. So you could technically raise 3 queens in a single deep colony. I've seen some beekeepers will even make 4-way queen castles. They'll even make it where they'll add in a 3rd plywood wall, and then you can have 4 different chambers. I'm not a huge fan of it because what I noticed is we never got very good consistent mating rates on it. We usually would get 1 or 2 queens would mate. I rarely ever got 3. Most of the time the middle chamber would fail, and the 2 opposing chambers here are the ones that would survive. And if you waited too long, because there was, potentially, 3,000 plus eggs being laid every day, because you could potentially have 3 queens in there, they swarm super fast. And sometimes the workers will just go in there and kill off one of the queens. They go, hey man, 3 queens, that's too many. We don't need that many. So they'll take one down. So you have to really pull them out pretty quick. And also, if you're like me, again, you got really old boxes, and that queen can kind of squeeze through a little rotten spot there. She'll jump into those other chambers, and you'll very quickly have 1 queen, as you know. So been there, done that. You can make honey off these things because you're going to have an excluder. And I used to do that too, but I'll tell you, it's going to get really old taking a full box of honey off every time you want to cage a queen. I don't recommend it, but if you really want to make a little extra money, you can do it. Best mating nuke, in my opinion, especially for hobbyists, just stick with your 5-frame nuke. They're so huge resource investment because they require 3 frames, right? 5 frames of resources. But you can do so much with them. You can technically pull the queen out of that, pull a frame out of there, put your grafts in there. You can make queen cells. You can mate your queens in there. You can sell them. You can use them for splits. I have some customers that buy nukes from us, and they'll split them in half and drop cells in them, and they make splits they split their nukes in early spring. So they're so flexible. They're really handy, but again, they just take a lot. If you've only got a couple hives, it's hard to make a bunch of those, obviously. That's something you want to do as you have more. And they don't swarm very quickly at all compared to the smaller nukes. So I usually recommend people, if you want to get into mating queens, just make you up a good 5-frame nuke. 3 brood, 2 honey on the outside, drop a cell, boom, you'll have a queen in a couple weeks. You take her out, it's going to be strong enough you can drop another cell in and just keep the whole thing rolling all the way through spring. These are my favorite. This is mostly what we use. We've got 700 of these this year. I'm going to buy more next year. There's 2 varieties that are really common. There's a 4-frame variety. There's also a 3-frame variety. These are made out of styrofoam, like a beer cooler or something. And you've got a little internal feeder there. You put sugar water, and you put something in there so the bees don't drown, little float, sticks, whatever. And they just have these itty bitty tiny miniature frames there. It literally is 1 cup of bees, a queen cell, and a cup of sugar water, and you got a queen in a couple of weeks. It's super profitable if you're selling, which sounds great, but in reality, it's kind of a nightmare. They're the most productive. If you're just running a few hives, don't do this. Just stick with the 2, stick with the queen castle if you want, stick with a 5-frame. Buy yourself a mini. You can get them for like 10, 20 bucks. They're super cheap. You'll see why they're tough. Again, they don't take many resources to build right off the bat. They do make I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but they do make artificial queen mandibular pheromone. It's called Tim Queen. They come in these little strips. You can cut them up. It's just an artificial queen pheromone. You can actually glue them into the frames of these little mini hives here. I usually just put a little all-purpose glue or something on there, and I stick this little pheromone strip. That'll help hold them because they're so itty-bitty, they're so tiny, and when you first build them, it's just an empty plastic frame, pretty much. The bees are like, this is not a hive. It's styrofoam and plastic. I want out of here. So you'll have a massively high not a swarming rate, you'll have an absconsion rate. So the bees will just straight up leave completely when you're first building them. They're very hard to get established. If you do want to try it, the pheromone strips can help hold those queens in there. What you got to do is you fill them up. You take I take a kitchen cup, and I shake a bunch of nurse bees into a box, plastic tote, whatever you got. I scoop them up. I usually mist them with just a tiny bit of water so they don't fly away. I pull out one of those frames of the minis. I dump them in there, put the frame back, put a queen cell in between the frames, give them a little splash of sugar water. I use just literally like a watering can like you'd have in your garden. And then bam, I put the lid back on, and they're totally sealed. They have this little trap door that'll slide up and down, and I lock them. And then you take all those minis and you put them in a dark, cold room for about 3 days. They got to have enough food. They got to have enough bees to survive for 3 days. you want that queen cell to hatch in that 3-day window. So somewhere in that 3-day time period, there's a virgin queen running around. She's going to start developing pheromones, spreading her smell. That's going to help hold those bees in when you do eventually open that hive. And the best way I found is to take them out at night. I'll go out there with a red lamp, and I'll set them out on pallets like this. And these have like a little door you can turn. Some of the other ones just have like a little flap, but you'll set them on pallets or the grass or whatever you want. Center blocks, doesn't matter. And you'll open them at night, because if you open them in midday, they're so cramped and hot and tight and agitated from being in that little box, they're just going to bull rush right out of the door, and they're gone. They won't come back because they haven't oriented, right? They don't know where they are. So if you open them at night, it gives them time to slowly come out and sniff around, sniff the entrance, go in the grass if they want, whatever. And then when the morning comes, they have time to slowly acclimate, although they will drift like insane. That's unfortunately part of it. Because they're so tiny, you've got to micromanage these suckers. Again, they're like, the chamber's like this big. And if you've got a queen in there, she's going to lay up all those frames full of brood. And then one day that brood's going to pop. And then that thing's going to explode from the high population. So you've got to go in them every week, every 2 weeks, definitely every 3 weeks. As soon as you see cat brood from that queen, which is usually 1 week after she emerges from the cell, you got to take her and cage her. Sell her, bank her, put her in a 5-frame bigger box, doesn't matter. If you don't do that, they're going to swarm and or abscond, and then you start that entire whole process of sealing them up and everything all over again, usually. So they're very, very unforgiving, like I was saying there. So you've got to just be on it. But because they don't really cost anything, who couldn't, even one person with one hive could spare several cups of bees during the spring, right? I just showed you can make a bunch of cells with one double deep from the cloak board. A cup of sugar water, anybody can afford that. So the profitability is extremely high. Or just if you're trying to save money and not running it as a business, you can produce them super cheap. But you got to really, really, really stay on them. Even with us, we were out there almost all the time in them. I mean, there were 2 or 3 of us out there doing those 700. We still had like 50% failure rates on those things constantly. All I did all stinking week was rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. And hopefully you get enough going to get enough queens to make your customers happy, or whatever you want to do.
Queen cells.
Yeah. Wait, say that again?
You will sell us queen cells.
I would if I was not moving to Tennessee in February. Unfortunately, Bill got me a little late, but normally I did. I'm leaving, but I'm sharing all my secrets, so just, hang on. So I got nothing to hide. You can make them yourself, I promise. The Cuts just down the road from me, Ryan Cuts. He's 5th generation. He taught me how to make cells. He also sells cells in the spring. Cuts honey. Bill knows who he is. Super nice people. What?
They are.
Oh, you know them? Yeah, they're really good. Yeah, I was terrible at grafting until I went over there and watched Ryan one time. He's like a robot. He was just like, just that fast. And I was like, right, I thought he was playing it up for me, because I was there. I was always showing beekeepers showing off, And then I went back and he showed me the graphs, man. I got like 90+% on his graphs. And I was like, are you kidding me? Back then we were getting like 10%. I was so irritated. And, but he showed me his method, and then I eventually got better too. But, I was stuck until Ryan helped me out. They're good. They're really good people. One thing that's super important that I'm sure most people know if you're raising queens is the drones. You've got to have male bees to mate with the virgin female queen, right? So, these are super important. I know a lot of people who aren't raising queens, they don't care about drones. They're, oh, they're lazy. They sit there, they eat my food. I think it looks like a queen, confuses me, whatever. But if you're raising queens, these are super, super important. So it takes 24 days from a drone to go from egg till it emerges into a drone. So a lot of people, when they start wanting to make queens, they look in their hive in the very beginning of spring, whatever, mid-March, into March, when you want to start grafting or something. And they go, wow, I didn't see drones yesterday, and now today it's full of drones. It's time to make some queens. Well, that's not really true, because it takes almost 2 weeks after those drones, or after they emerge, to hit sexual maturity. Just because you see drones in the colony at the beginning of the year. Now, obviously, it doesn't matter once you're well into the season. They can't mate with the queens yet. This is just their life cycle, so they still have their exoskeletons, wings have to harden just like any of the other bees, like the queen does. They also have to go on orientation flights, just like the queen does. And around day 12 is when they reach sexual maturity. So that's really important. So don't just say, oh, I have drones, I can make queens. You might make a few queens, you're probably going to get a very subpar, low quality queen that's going to give out and be a drone layer in a few months, because I did that last year pretty badly. So I won't make that mistake again. And then, of course, drones also go on mating flights around day 12 or plus. They will, I've never seen this. Maybe you guys have. I've never seen it once. I see pictures and I've read in books, but I have never seen a drone congregation area. You'll just see them on a leaf from what I've seen on the pictures. It would just be like a crap ton of nothing but drones just hanging out, apparently. And all they're doing is waiting for a virgin to fly by and so they can jump on her. And that's what they do. But that's what they're looking for when they go on those orientation flights. I want to see one so bad, but I never do. And the queens come back mated. I know they're out there. I just don't know where they're hanging out. There's like a club or something, I guess, and I'm just not invited. But I want to tie a string to one or something and just, like follow it like a kite. But that's a cool thing with drones. They do need time to reach sexual maturity. A lot of people don't know that. If you want to get into queen production, they're not going to matter so much if you just have a couple of hives. But if you want to start producing more, this is really important about where you place your drone producing colonies, because a queen does not want to mate with her brothers, right? She does. I know we're in the South, but it's state of the queens don't like it. So
We move up toward West Virginia.
yeah, they may have. I don't know. I asked some of those beekeepers, but what they do, the virgin queens will fly further and faster than the drones, and that's just a natural selection process to stop inbreeding. So it can happen, sure, but generally what you want to do if you want to produce a lot of queens, you need to have another hive or a whole bee yard if you're at that level about a mile or two away, because that virgin queen is going to fly 2 to 3 miles after she emerges from the cell when she goes on her mating flight. So that's a pretty big radius. So you want to have another hive or set of hives 1 to 2 miles, ideally all over the place. And what will happen is those kind of flight rings, if you want to think about it like a circumference on a map or something, those circles will overlap, and that's going to increase your likelihood that you're going to be mated. 10 to 20 drones is average what you want to mate for. You want to aim for 20 drones because that is going to produce a superior quality queen. Generally more, the better. If you guys have ever seen those green plastic drone frames that you can get, yeah.
We use it for varroa control.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you guys saying that. That's an option. Obviously, they make a lot of drones, so they're really good for producing drones. You can get 1,600 plus, depending on the size of the frame and the exact design and how much pollen and honey and blah, blah, blah.
Unfortunately for this, they're also excellent for producing varroa.
They are good for varroa, but you got to have varroa if you want to have queens. A little bit, kind of. They go hand in hand, but so does everything, I guess, with bees. But one of those drone frames can mate with 1,600 drones. That's enough to mate with about 80 queens if you're doing it at 20 drone per mating per virgin queen. So that would be considered a well-mated queen. That's every 24 days. So if you think, I've got 1,000 mating nukes or whatever, you can do the math and say, okay, I need X number of drone producing frames in X number of area. You have to plot it out on the map. You got to go talk to the neighbors and get a bee yard 2 miles an hour over here, 2 miles over there, 2 miles over there. Make sure the drone frame, which the bees are going to produce drones without those frames. Like we know that, but that helps when you're doing the math to make sure you're well mated. So when a customer comes to me and go, hey, how many drones, which there's no freaking way I could ever know how many drones that queen is mated with. There is a way. You send her to a lab and she's dissected, but then she's not laying any more eggs. We do that. We do that as well. We send ours off to the North Carolina Queen Clinic to have them dissected, and we have their sperm analyzed to make sure they're well mated. They'll actually give you like a grade too, like A+ to F-, I guess, or something. I don't know what the low grade is. We got I think they gave us an A or A- this year, I believe, which was really good. I think just a step under their top rating. So that's something to think about if you want to do it. Now, odds are probably pretty good. I don't know about in Alabama, but I know in Florida, you throw a rock, you hit it like half a dozen different beekeepers. They're everywhere down there. And there's definitely swarms all over the place too, right, in the woods and stuff. So their odds are pretty good. Your queen's going to make fine if you mate your own queen. I mean, if they didn't, you guys probably wouldn't have any hives. I doubt, guys are, I don't know, maybe they are. There's a lot of beekeepers here in Alabama, right?
Yeah,
I
we
think.
have a fair number.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's some Florida guys, just jumping across the border from time to time to get those cotton fills. They're really nice. That pollen's really good in the winter, the mustard radish, but I didn't say anything about that. Anyways,
What we don't know, we won't tell.
There you go. I'm leaving out of state, so I'm innocent. I can't do anything. My bees are about to be gone. So this is what's called a queen bank. This is going to be more if you're producing them for a business, right? You do not need this if you got a couple hives in your backyard. This is how you can store a lot of queens. This is usually like how I store queens. You can think of it as like whatever, any kind of long storage for queens. It's like a little vending machine. You just open them up, you pop them out, and you give them a little sugar water. That's instead of popping a $5 bill in there or something. But you can put a bunch. You can have a single deep colony that's very, very strong with potentially up to 100 mated queens in there at a time. There is some loss, and in the queens, you have to factor that in. But when you're producing at scale, having some degree of loss is just part of the process. You can't save everything. Queen banks, there's really two types. There's a queen right queen bank. So that's similar to how I was talking about the cloak board earlier. You're going to have like a 2-story colony with a queen excluder in between the two boxes. You have a queen doing her thing down there. You're going to have a lot of open brood up top, just exactly same as the construction of the cloak board. It's just you don't have that slide mechanism. And then you're going to bank your queens and put them in a cage in kind of a little bar just like that. And that's nice because you have a queen down there that's laying and she's going to be generating bees. So you don't have to constantly dump tons of amounts of brood in from another colony to keep your bank going. But because there is a free roaming queen down there, the bees will act more aggressively towards your caged queens, which will result in a higher mortality rate of the caged queens and potentially more damage, like foot pad damage, wing damage. It's going to put the queens in the cage under higher stress too. So I don't recommend doing that. But if you only had like one colony, you needed a bank of queen just short term, a day or two, you can get away with it. The better way is to do queenless, and that's just like I was showing. It can be a double deep, triple deep, it can be a single, it doesn't matter. It's just a really strong hive, tons of nurse bees, not old forager bees, young, brand new, freshly hatched nurse bees that can produce a lot of royal jelly that are more accepting of new queens. Then you can put like that frame in there that I was showing that had all the cages. And because that hive doesn't have a queen, they're going to be more accepting and be more gentle of all those foreign queens. And, you can have 100 queens in a bank. So that's a lot of money too. And I'll tell you, until you start banking, the stress every day going over there and opening that lid and pulling those things out and hoping that most of them are alive the next day because the bees didn't kill them is tremendous. It gives me, I'm going to lose my hair soon, I think. So I don't know. It's very stressful, but you have to deal with that when you're banking queens. And you want to build them really strong. Usually you just want to build them with like a frame of honey, frame of pollen, and ideally a lot of frame of open brood. I just went over that.
What kind of cage are you caging them in?
There's a ton of types, and everybody's got a different opinion on it, but I use the plastic JZBZ, like those white ones that I'd shown in the picture there. A lot of guys like the wooden California minis. I have some customers who won't even touch me because I use plastic. They want wood, but everybody has a preference. I have used both. We've used the 3-hole cages, 3-hole punch cages, which are massive. That's the ones we have to send the queens off to the North Carolina lab because you can put a bunch of attendants inside of those cages. So when they open them in a lab, you don't have workers flying everywhere. The smaller plastic JZBZ cages and the California minis, you can technically get like 5 attendants in there, but it's pretty cramped. A lot of times you shake the bees on top of the cages in your shipping box, which the lab doesn't like, I guess for obvious reasons. But, they're nurse bees. I'm like, come on, guys, you're a bee clinic. Like, come on, put a veil on. But, yeah, that's how I like to do it. Let me see here. It was, like these. Yeah, these are just the plastic ones. They're actually imprinted with mandibular pheromone, too, with queen mandibular pheromone. That's why if you ever get a box of them, they have it's a very weird smell. It's so strong, it like knocks you back. It's not pleasant. It smells artificial, but it's concentrated into those cages. So the bees are supposed to be more gentle towards the queens. And JZBZ, which is the company that makes these, they make these shipping bars, which are common. You see they snap in there really well. They make boxes. They make the cell cups. They have like a whole proprietary queen rearing system. That's why I like them. But yeah, a lot of guys do like the wooden California minis. There's a big, it's like arguing over a 10 frame or an 8 frame hive. Whatever. Everybody's got their preference. I usually expect to lose about 10% of the queens that I bank every single week out of about 100 queens. 50 to 100 queens is what I usually bank in at a time. So you've got to factor that in when you start taking customer orders or you want to make splits or whatever. That can happen. So you have to produce a surplus all the time. You have to produce a surplus to offset the bad mating flights, to offset some queens are going to be born without a leg, without a wing. Customer doesn't want to pay for those. You got to call those out. You got to factor in the 10% loss in your bank. If you're shipping queens, usually industry standard is to give 5% extra queens when a shipping order. So you got to factor in all these little extra things when you take in like queen orders for customers, and then figure out what your mating rate is, which might be 70, 80, 90%. And then look at all your colonies out there and then deduct all of those losses, figure out how much you're likely to get and hope that number is correct. And it usually never is. And then that's how many orders you can take that week or that month. So you've got to know all these little losses that are piling up, which after a while, you just know that. You do it all the time. You're like, okay, yeah, I know I'm going to lose 40% or whatever the heck. That's something to think about if you want to start a queen business. Let's see. Some people don't like queen banking, and I understand the concern, but they are incorrect because the science irrefutably proves them wrong. A lot of people think that queen banking causes a lot of damage to the queens. It can happen. It does happen. I've seen it happen, but it's a tiny percentage of those queens that are being lost. The queens do shrink in size while they're caged and while they're banked. They're not consuming as many calories, but once they're released into the new colony, they'll gain weight back just fine once the nurse bees begin to feed them. A lot of people are worried that because the queen is not laying eggs and the sperm is not traveling through her spermatica and being released from her abdomen, that would cause the sperm in her spermatica to degrade. They think this whole thing's got to be flowing. There's been tons and tons and tons of studies that show that's not true. That's not the case. There have been queens that have been banked for like up to 6 months in Canada and stuff, and they've been proven time and time again to be exactly the same as freshly caged queens. But that's kind of a myth thing, and I get it. People are like, oh, that poor queen, it's in a cage for a week or two. I don't know. Usually we don't bank more than a week or two anyways because we're constantly rotating them out. I think it's the really massive ones like gardeners or something, they're producing tens and tens of thousands of queens. They're doing long-term banking. But a lot of people have that concern. Honestly, it's not an issue. The only issue, which you'll never see, is that I lose that 10% of the queens that are in there. And that's not usually at the bees harming the queens. It's that the bees will focus their resources on the queens with the stronger, healthier pheromones, which I always tell customers that means that's a selection process. If a queen has poor pheromones, that means you as a customer are going to have problems introducing her, having supersedure issues, having less leg laying capacity. So if she's dying in my bank, the worker bees are deciding which queens are worth saving and which aren't. So I actually think you get a higher quality queen by being banked than if I cage her fresh, because you would never know that until she's in your hive and she's dead, and then you're calling me and you're really unhappy with me and saying bad words, which happens. So, but I'm developing thick skin. So I did take some of my percentages from 2024. This is for queen cells now, for graft percentages. If you guys, again, you're probably in the same climate, but I broke them down by different months. I just tracked what we were getting. That's the graft percentages when I take that little 4-day-old larva, I put it in a cell cup, I stick it in a queenless colony, and then how many of those cells are started 24 hours later. And you can see January was way too early, and February was way too early as well. Usually if you want to start making cells, you want to start making them in the second half of March here. That's when you're going to have some drone population, you're going to have higher protein from the pollen coming in, and the weather's going to be warming up a lot. April and May are the ideal times to make queen cells, but you're going to have to start making your grafts in March because a lot of customers are going to want to buy the first week of April. So that's something to think about there. This is your mating percentages for your queens. If you guys want to know like how many of those queens are going to mate properly, I broke those down by the 3 seasons. So this is how many were drone, or how many were queen right versus how many were drone layers. So like in March, I had a 50% mating success. So if I went out there and made 1,000 mating nukes, 50% of those queens failed, became drone layers or died or whatever. So really, really high loss rate there. Don't really like it. You can see I got a massive increase in April, 70 to 80%, and then May at 90%. Of course, your August, your summer dearth is pretty bad. That's when we take a big hit, and that's our dearth there. Fall starts picking up after the dearth until we kind of get into October, November, and as the fall pollen starts to die off the goldenrod, drone population drops, mating rates drop with it. So that's kind of the ideal time to do it, but you almost have to kind of start in March because customers, again, they're going to be beating down your door that first week of April. They're usually beating down your door mid-March, which is crazy because that's when you're just starting to graft usually. But they're always everybody wants queens early. And I'll tell you a little tip as a queen breeder. The first batch of the queens of the year and the last batch of the queens of the year are always the worst because they're not mated well in the beginning. And usually the breeder is either caving into financial pressure because we're broke by that time. We got no money. It's overwintered. Got nothing. Or the customers are just being so hyper aggressive and pushing you and threatening to leave you. And I'm going to go buy from this guy and that guy, blah, blah, blah. You say, crap, man, I'm just going to graft anyways. I'm going to take that 50% hit on all my queens because I want to keep that contract with this dude. And then he gets those 50% that are mated, say like in March. I guarantee you probably like 25% of them are good out of that 50%. They'll be mated to 50%, but half of them were mated so poorly, there'll be a drone layer within 3 to 6 months. I guarantee you. Don't buy mated queens. At least Central and Southern Florida are an exception, but Northern Florida and above, do not buy March queens. Don't do it. Wait until the first, second week of April. Ask the breeder and say, hey man, I want your second generation of queens. Don't get that first generation. I promise you, don't do it. But that's it. So you guys are trying to wrap up, I think, huh? Am I talking too long? I'm moving quick. So when to cage mated queens, these are the mating nukes we use and 5-frame nukes. We go out there. We put the JZBZs here in our shipping bar. These bees were not on the queens, by the way. These were like just empty cage, or they were just cages with queens in them. And as you're caging, the bees will just drift over to them, which is great. When you start putting them in shipping boxes and shipping them across the country, those bees have accepted those queens because they came freely to them. But that happens all the time sometimes it's so much, it looks like a swarm on top. And actually that's bad because they'll actually overheat and suffocate the queens. I've lost entire bars here because I left these out in the shade and I went in for lunch or something and all the queens were overheated and killed. So you want to watch it. A few bees are good. That's nice. That's perfect. But you don't want to swarm on top of them. Just real quick, this is just going to help you guys as customers to know when you should buy queens. In my opinion, when you're buying queens from a breeder, a lot of people, one thing they love to ask is what's your breed of your queen, which honestly, there is no breed really. Unless they're artificially inseminating, everything's kind of a mutt. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. If they've got a certified VSH, or that's Varroa sensitive hygienic queen, and it's been certified by a lab, different story, but those are usually artificially inseminated. We do hybrids. Mine's kind of an Italian Carniolan hybrid, but I've mixed in Caucasian and Buckfast and everything over the years, on top of shipping them around the country and catching everybody else's drone. So who knows what they are? I tell people they're Italian Carniolan hybrid because they put a gun to my head and say, tell me what breed of bee you have. And I'm like, she lays eggs, man. I mean, I don't know. They're all different shapes, sizes, colors. They're diverse. But anyways, this is where the question you need to ask, that was the point of that little rant from your breeder, is when did they cage that queen? That's the key magic question. That's going to determine how good that queen really is. The ideal time to cage a queen is 21 to 28. This is an Australian study. It's really good, but obviously I just took a little snippet. 21 to 28 days is your ideal window. These are the days when they were caught. Generally, queen breeders catch every 7 days. You got 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. Research suggests that after 35 days old, there is no net benefit in aging that queen. The older the queen, the stronger her pheromones. It's imperative that she's born and lives for 3 or 4 weeks, ideally, in the hive that she was born in before she's yanked out of there and thrown into another hive. And 21 to 28 is ideal. And you can see right here, this is introduction success after 14 days. So this is a customer like you bought a cage of a queen, you stuck it in a queenless colony. This is what percentage of those queens, based off the age that they were caged, of what was still there 14 days and alive. Look at 1 week. You got 1 week in, you only got 15% of those queens. Imagine those customers that buy 500 queens, 1,000 queens. They'd be furious. There's 14 days old. And I can tell you right now, that's bad anyways, because guess what happens at 14 days old? A queen's just starting to lay eggs. You know how you can tell a queen has mated? Not from the eggs. You tell a queen is mated from camp worker brood being present in the brood nest, which happens at day 21. If the guys are snatching up queens at 14, not only do you have a significantly higher failure rate after introduction, you can't even guarantee they're mated in the first place. These guys are scamming you. Do not buy 14. 21 to 28 is kind of your ideal window. You got similar times. There's a slight increase at 35, but honestly, from a producer standpoint, I can produce way more queens at 21 than 35, and I don't care if it's only a 5% increase in rates. But every breeder is different. That's my opinion. This similar thing, we got the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 week study here, the percentage of the queens that were still alive 15 weeks in. So about four months almost after the queen was introduced and was still fertile and viable and was reaching satisfactory performance. So again, 1 week is terrible, 10%, 2 weeks, 12%. You got 21, day 21, 28. I mean, honestly, look, that's still pretty crappy. Imagine buying a queen and 4 months later, it's only slightly over half of them are still there, alive, or productive.
I've been there and done that.
Yeah, over 50% of the world has, apparently. So judging from the math here. So this is where you do get a massive increase at that 35 days. When the queen was at 35 days old after she was caught, you get 65%. That still kind of sucks. I mean, really, not even 4 months out of your queens. You basically got like flipping a coin. So again, I stick with 21 days because 28 days, 2.5% increase. I don't care. I'd rather pop out a queen every week faster. 35 days, couldn't do it just because I run the minis. The minis, you can't really keep queens in past 21 days because of the swarming and absconsion issue. You would have to have a larger size colony to hit these 4 and 5 week time periods. But anyways, my point of showing you guys that is ask your breeder how old that queen was when they caught her and put her in the cage. That's the most important question you can ask, in my opinion. I won't go over all these. You guys can just kind of read over those real fast. These are just really common mistakes I see people see, whether the queens are dying when they're installed or your cell builder's not capping the cells. It's normal to see about a 10% failure when you introduce a mated queen into a new colony. So if you buy 100 queens, what is that? 10 queens would fail out of that. You would expect about 90. If you got higher than a 10% failure, something's wrong. Everybody freaks out about their queen cells not hatching out. That's why I don't have a queen, blah, blah, blah. On average, only 1 to 2% of your queen cells don't actually hatch. If something is more than that, then something went usually significantly wrong. Queen cells are actually pretty darn hardy, believe it or not. A lot of people think you got to be super gentle with them. I'm almost done, I promise. I only got a couple more slides. This isn't going to apply to you guys a whole lot, but I just wanted you guys to kind of know my side of the equation, and this is kind of the profitability side of running it. If you're shipping queens, these are some of the boxes you would ship them in. There's a few orders I put together. You've got your queens in your cage here. You've got a sponge with water. I've got a little bit of fondant between some wax paper so they can eat. Obviously, they can breathe. You want them well covered with bees. If you receive an order of queens, if you ever order them and they're not covered with bees, that's sketchy. You want them well saturated with nurse bees. But these are some of the costs that go in it. It's usually about $20 a box, give or take. The best shipping service to get is UPS next day air, their next day. But it's usually going to cost you between $50 and $100, irregardless of the quantity of queens you ordered. So it's very expensive, but it's almost always successful. I already told you guys, usually industry standards adding about 5% extra queens. So that's 1 free queen for every 25 you order. It's kind of like when you buy a shirt, they always have that 1 extra button like sewn on the inside of it in case you lose one. You got to do that with queens too for customers. And I'd rather give you a free queen than you call me because 1 queen died because I shipped it to California and you lost one. And then you want me to resend it. And now I got to eat $50 to $100 to reship it back out there with UPS next year. Better take the hit. And if they do die in the shipping process, good luck getting your money, either me or you, because the shipping company is going to fight you to death on that. You'll never get it. This is just some of the profitability. If you ever want to think about getting into queens or honey or whatever, I broke down kind of what we make on profit in some of these. So if you've got queen production going through March through August, you can get about 6 mated queens, give or take. I definitely take, usually, per mating nuke. So that's 6 queens. So if you got 6 queens, you're selling them at $25 a piece. That's about $150 annually per mating nuke that you can make. You can sell queen cells for $4 to $5 a cell. The expenses are minimal when it comes to mating nukes. You got a little water, you got a cage. There's not much to it. If you're shipping queens, the customer is paying for that expense. They're paying for UPS, they're paying for the box, you're paying for the shipping bar, you're paying for the cage and the queens. So it's pretty profitable in that sense. If you want to compare it against honey production, if you average 30 to 60 pounds per hive, let's just say you'll sell your honey at $10 a pound. That's $300 to $600 per hive, plus you got your bottle lid label cost in there. If you sell your honey in 55-gallon barrels, $285 per pound, which I think I was selling it for $280 per pound this year, you're looking at around $85 to $171 per hive. Or you can look at nuke production. which if you're selling a nuke for 150 bucks, subtract the equipment cost, you're going to make about $120 per nuke. Of course, you're also losing the nuke, the queen, the comb. The comb is the gold, right? That's where your money really is. So you can see it's actually quite profitable raising queens as comparison to some of these other revenue streams, which ideally you want to tap into all of these because queens can go south on you pretty quick, which is why we do a little bit of everything. But that's just a gist of the money in it. If you guys are interested, obviously you have to scale up. That's my social media and stuff, and I am done. Thanks.